Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner, and man, this is going to be a fantastic episode. It is central. It is, we in investing we have this thing called fundamental analysis where we look externally into things, but today we're going to look at something even more fundamental. We're going to take our locus of control inside and learn a little bit about how the investing mind works. And to do that, we've got a special guest. Hersh Shefrin has written a book called Beyond Greed and Fear. Listen to this: Understanding Behavioral Finance and the Psychology of Investing. I remember the first investing class I took. My instructor said if you only could take one class in college for investing, it wouldn't be economics, it wouldn't be finance, it'd be psychology. It'd be how to deal with the stuff inside of our heads. We're going to have a great discussion with this. Before I formally turn the time over to our guest, I just remind you to like and subscribe to the channel, and also go check out our website, cashflowbonus.com, with lots of great free things you can download. Very, very important. So with that, let's hop right in. Hersh, would you talk a little bit about first your background, introduce yourself just a little bit, and kind of bring people up to speed on why you decide to author Beyond Greed and Fear, Understanding Behavioral Finance and the Psychology of Investing?
Okay. Well, Andy, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your program. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful.
As for me, I grew up in Canada, and as an undergraduate, I studied physics and math, and that was my love and my passion. I took economics as really a filler course and just fell in love with it. And that provided me with an option and a little bit of angst, because for years I thought I would really be a theoretical physicist, and somehow my brain was telling me, no, think again. And what really appealed to me and convinced me to shift into economics was that economists were using mathematics and physics-like concepts to study their field. And that really drew me in. That's a little bit of an irony, because in the end, I came to understand that that was problematic, because that way of thinking ignored the underlying psychology. So I came to that understanding eventually, and then the question became, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but find a way to bring them together. So I was looking and having difficulty finding psychologists who really spoke the language of economics and could help bridge the gap. But serendipity has an important way of stepping into your life. When I was in my first academic position at the University of Rochester in upstate New York, there was a like-minded economist who was one step ahead of me and had already contacted psychologists who could speak the language of economics, and were doing that. So my colleague's name is Richard Thaler. I'm happy to say, won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017. And I was really thrilled by that, and just thrilled to be 1 degree of separation away from him. Our work wound up being recognized as part of the prize. So it came down to me in an indirect way, but I was really happy about that. So that's kind of what happened, that I eventually came to understand that mathematics and physics give you great tools to study economics, but it's not enough. And I, as it happened, wound up being mentored in psychology by the two most important psychologists in the 20th century. And that was Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. So that was sort of the beginning. And you asked me about what led me to write the book. So Dick Thaler and I started to work on bringing psychology into economics in the mid-1970s. And then when I moved from Rochester to Santa Clara, where I've been since 1978. Um, uh, my colleague Mayor Statman joined our faculty, and he was really intrigued. And he and I together decided that finance was a great application for these ideas. So we called our what we called our field of study behavioral finance, just by switching the economics and the finance part, bringing in the finance and substituting for economics. And um, uh, and then Dick Thaler also moved into finance, and so uh, there was a body of economists now really beginning to work with psychologists to develop the field. There was so much that was new and so much that was exciting. It was just you just felt the neural connections in your head. The wires were just heating up. It was so exciting to be thinking about how to consider issues differently. People kept asking me, well, why don't you write a book? And I just kept on saying through the 80s, no, it's not. We don't know enough. It just doesn't feel like the right time. And then around 1995, when I got asked, well, would you like to write a book? I thought to myself, well, maybe now might be the time, or soon. So I began to work on this book, and it took me 4 years, maybe 5 years to actually write it. But in the end, it was a great publisher. Harvard Business School Press was the publisher. It was part of the Financial Management Association series, so it had a group of a readership that had both an academic slant but a practitioner slant, and that's really what I wanted. I wanted a book that was real world and focused on how real people thought, even though mathematical models are my first love. You have to move outside and meet people where they are. So that was the history underlying the way the book initially evolved.
So I'll tell everyone why I'm so excited about this, and why I really believe this will become a staple for many, many people. I get nervous when I speak to people on my podcast, because without variance, I'm always speaking to people smarter than me. So I hope I can ask some intelligent questions. But I do have a little bit of experience. I've been involved in learning and teaching for about 30 years now. When I say that, I don't feel like I've been around that long. But I love all of my students. We have students in about 170 countries, but there's two students that I play favorites on. And their name are Zach Tanner and David Tanner. They're my two sons. And both of them excel in math and physics. One of them just went off to college, and he studied the life of Jim Simons quite a bit, who was big into quantitative analysis, and yet as you look at his life, the humanness of his own brain, it took him a while to figure it out and find that balance between the mathematical models and the quant models, and dealing with the folly that we inherit with our lizard brain. So I would just tell people this: go pick up a copy of Beyond Greed and Fear: Understanding Behavioral Finance and the Psychology of Investing, because here's what I believe. Most people that come to the Cash Flow Academy are coming to make more money. That's what they're after. They want another income stream. They want more financial freedom. And so they think in their head that, well, I'm just going to learn a recipe for investing and I'm going to copy it. And there's a lot of truth to that. If a person read Warren Buffett's annual letters and listened to the late Charlie Munger, they'd have a pretty good recipe. But what they don't realize is that the very moment they embark to be an investor or an entrepreneur, either one, they're actually going to be entering into a project of personal development. In other words, investing has a very keen or inevitable, it might be the word. It's inevitable that my weaknesses are going to be put on display for the world to see. And a lot of that has to do with that little lizard brain that makes us do things just inherently, innately, that are opposite of really how investing can work. So this internal discovery, this study of Beyond Greed and Fear that you've written about, I think it's more important in many ways than fundamental analysis or technical analysis or quantitative analysis, because we're dealing with machinery that's evolved over time that maybe isn't, we're certainly not Mr. Spock, are we? We're more like Dr. McCoy or Captain Kirk. So let's start with this. Beyond greed and fear, let's talk about greed first, and then we'll see if we can go beyond it. Let's talk about greed and fear first, and that psychology or anything you'd like to begin with, in the discussion that way.
Great. Well, first of all, let me just say that's a terrific question, Andy, and I appreciate it. It really helps to tee up the punchlines, the real key takeaways from the approach.
Good. I'm afraid I ask long-winded questions. Sometimes I ask a $10 question that only needs to be a 10-cent question. So hopefully that's a $64,000 question.
So as a professor, let me just say you should be a professor, or maybe you are, because
I think I'm probably there's probably restraining orders for most of the Ivy League schools. My son, as I said, I didn't do well in college, but he did, and he got recruited by a lot of these schools to play basketball. And when I'd go on campus, I think people could feel themselves being dumber by osmosis somehow. So I'm not a very bright guy, but I do love learning.
I think you're humble and modest is what I think. So I'll start off by talking about what's at the beginning of the book, and then I'll talk about what's at the end of the book. Okay, and then everything in between is basically just commentary, is what it is. The beginning of the book says that the phrase "beyond greed and fear" is shorthand for the fact that there's much more to the psychology of investing than just the two emotions of greed and fear. And greed is a bit of a misnomer in most cases, but not all, because the real emotion is not so much greed as hope. Greed is really a sin. It's one of the 7 deadly sins. So it's excessive hope. But the question is about balance. We need fear in our lives so we don't touch hot stoves and we are alert to danger. And we need hope in our lives so that we can see opportunities and capitalize on opportunities and make better lives for ourselves. But alongside the fear and the hope is what you call the lizard brain. The technical term that Daniel Kahneman introduced was System 1 thinking. But he also called it fast thinking. So his book is titled Thinking Fast and Slow. And so there's a part of our brain that needs to be able to think quickly so that we can make rapid decisions, because if we spend too much time thinking and don't take a decision, we might be goners and prey to some predator. So yep. That part of our brain needs to be well developed. But the thing about humans that distinguishes us from other living creatures is that we have a prefrontal cortex in our brain that engages in conscious thinking and deliberation. And that's what he calls slow thinking, System 2 thinking. And that means that it's the rational planning part of our brain, the part of our brain that tries to be rational. But that part of our brain really requires a lot more resources, glucose, time, rested energy, than the fast thinking part of our brain. So it doesn't expend as much effort interacting with the fast thinking part of our brains. And for that reason, we're not perfectly rational decision makers, we're imperfectly rational decision makers. And that imperfect rationality is a reflection of an interaction between our emotional part of our brain and our rational thinking part of our brain. And if we don't get the balance right, then we can, for most people, our emotions will govern what we do almost all the time, and then be mediated by a voice within our head that tries to get us to be more reasonable. And then on the other side, some people overthink things too much. So there's not enough emotion. Um, but what the book at the beginning in Beyond Greed and Fear, the attempt is to say, look, you want to think about behavioral finance as having three components. The first is what's called heuristic-driven bias. A heuristic is a mental shortcut. It's a shortcut that our lizard brain uses because it's easy and fast, ridiculously easy and fast. But it's not perfect. So because it's not perfect, it leaves us susceptible to biases, meaning a predisposition towards making a mistake. But it's not as if it's usually terrible. It's just not perfect. So heuristic-driven bias is the first element of behavioral finance. The second element of behavioral finance is called frame dependence. And that's a fancy way of saying that the decisions we take to solve a problem oftentimes depend not just on the fundamentals defining the problem, but the way the problem is described. So you mentioned fundamental analysis, that investors come to your podcast to learn about fundamentals and techniques that will help them be better investors. And so frame dependence says there's more to fundamentals that impacts the way people think. And that has to do with the way that our brain takes in information and assembles it emotionally as well as cognitively. And we need to understand that if I present you with the same fundamental issue, but I describe it in two different ways, how I describe it can impact the decision you make. So that's the second component. And then the third component is not so much at the individual level, but it's how all of us as imperfectly rational investors interact in the market. So there's a concept called market efficiency, which says that the market collectively makes the best use of all the information that's available. You might make a mistake, Andy, as an investor. I might make a mistake as an investor, but some of the market, when it takes our collective decisions together, assembles it in a way that is reasonable and sensible, so that in its strongest form, it's impossible to actually earn alpha, earn an abnormal profit. We can get what's reasonable as a return on the risk we bear, but don't expect more from that. Don't think you can outsmart the market. Don't think you can beat the market. In an efficient market, you can't. And the third component of behavioral finance is to say, because of these two elements, heuristic-driven bias and frame dependence, markets are not efficient. There are opportunities for abnormal returns. There are opportunities for alpha. That's what the beginning of the book says. Now I'll come to the end of the book.
Well, I've got to interject because that's gold. I mean, just flat out gold. This idea of heuristics. It is interesting that I geek out. When people ask me what I read for leisure, I says, well, I don't ever read for leisure, because to me the growth and leisure are one and the same. And I geek out on neuroscience a lot because of this. And people often, I'll mention something, and I'll mention something, for example, Tally Sherritt, and they'll say, well, why are you having a neuroscientist on your podcast? Why would you do this? And the way I would explain it to people is, when you can discover that there's more than one you inside there, and the equipment is important. We have an amygdala, and there are certain neural pathways. If I touch a hot stove and I pull my hand back, then I realize it was hot. And that's that speed that you're talking about. Well, that cannot just happen with physical touch, but it can happen with information that's placed in front of me. I can have that same reaction. And so the heuristics, these processes are important to learn about. I'd like to share a brief story and get your comments on this, because I think it might be an appropriate metaphor. So when I was in college, I had a car that I never locked. I left the keys in it because I was the only one that could drive it. It was a 1968 Dodge Dart, multiple colors if you count Bondo as a color, and it was a beater car, like a poor college kid would drive. And in this Dodge Dart, it had a gear shift on the steering column. They called it a 3 on the tree. It had 3 gears in reverse. And one day I was driving along, and I went to go from first to second, and it jammed in neutral. I couldn't get it. So I rolled to a stop, and I pop open the hood, not really knowing much about cars, but a little. And there was a series of rods and pins and bearings there was linkage between the gear shift and the actual transmission. I saw that where it had jammed. I just kind of cranked it with my hands, fixed it, and went on my way till it would jam again. It was getting worn. And because I began to visualize what was happening under the hood, and I started to understand what I call the flaw in my machinery, I was able to become more aware of it. And I found that if I put just slight tension on the gear shift, as I would go to first or second, I could do it. My girlfriend couldn't drive it, my brother couldn't drive it, my dad couldn't drive it, because only I understood the machinery, and it was inherently flawed, right? It didn't last a long time. And I realized that that's kind of how I feel about my brain. My eyes can see colors, but they don't see infrared. They don't see the moons of Jupiter, and they don't see the microbes on the sponge. And I can go through every sense that way, and I can also go through my mental processes and say, what's under that hood? And if I read Beyond Greed and Fear, I'm going to learn a little bit about that heuristic, and the self-awareness that comes helps me recognize my own physiology and help me recognize a little bit when those different heuristics are at play. I might find myself, I look at greed, and I describe it often as just a different form of fear, the fear of missing out on what could be. And I get so worried about that, and I thought, okay, Andy, always be bigger than your money is what I tell my kids. Always be bigger than your money. If you start feeling funky and you're self-aware, you might be slipping into a heuristic. What I thought was fascinating about what you said, though, is the idea of balance of the other side of that coin, of someone who might over-engineer, overthink, and never pull the trigger. They're paper trading for 5 years because they're trying to get it perfect before they pull the trigger. This is absolute gold if people can understand that, everybody, the culture of advice, give me a stock pick so I can make money. That's lazy. That is, give me free money. I don't want to learn anything, I don't work anything. And when people take that advice route rather than the education route, they miss out on a personal development that not only helps you with your investing, it helps you in your marriage, it helps you as a father, it helps you every part of your life, this personal development that we're talking about. So this is fantastic. The second thing I thought was brilliant was the idea of framing, to me, which is the context in which these things exist and how we view them. And then the idea, I actually do believe that there's a chance to get a little bit of alpha, because if I learn a little bit about time decay, a little bit about high probability option trading and risk management when it doesn't go well, I do believe that people can get an alpha, a bit of alpha. Maybe not unrealistically, but certainly that's been proven to be the case at MIT, and other mathematicians have shown that it is possible to seek some alpha. So I'm fascinated for this little halftime, and let's hop in. We're coming up on time. I knew this was going to go long, so before I asked you, I go, now, is this a hard stop, or can we geek out a little bit? So if you have a hard stop, and there's enough geeking out, but I think this is fantastic little halftime. Tell us the other part of the journey, if you don't mind. We'll do spoiler alerts if necessary.
Just before I get to the last part of the book, let me just connect back to you in terms of those wonderful insights that you just laid out. So the first is on alpha. Jim Simon, who you mentioned, showed us there's alpha.
Yes. And his colleagues, we lost Munger and we lost Simon recently, but his colleagues at MIT have actually done papers that have mathematically shown you can beat the market. It's possible.
One of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the book in terms of why read the book links back to your description of your car. So the idea in reading the book as a practitioner is number one, learn to recognize well-identified behavioral mistakes that you might make, but also that others might make. So look around you. It's not just you. And the more used you get to looking at others, the more introspection you'll have about yourself. Second, as you read the book, think about understanding why we make these mistakes, why we're vulnerable. That's you looking under the hood of your car to see if you could figure what was wrong. And then the third thing is, once you have that understanding, figure out what you can do to avoid the mistake. And that's you developing a tactile heuristic to figure out how to shift your gears so that you could move that car in the direction you wanted and get where you wanted to go. And it happened because you invested the time and the mental effort in order to do it. And that's why nobody else can drive your car.
Absolutely true.
The end of the book.
Or they said there were actually two reasons, though. Not only could they not drive it, there's no one that would want that car. That's why my wife doesn't care. Sometimes I forget my wedding ring, and people say, "Doesn't your wife?" She goes, "She knows no one wants to steal this car." Great stuff. I'm fascinated. There's something you said that's really insightful. I hope people caught. And we're using some words that are a bit above my pay grade. But the word heuristic might be described as a process, or an algorithm is probably not a great word for that. But that's a tremendous insight to. Let's review what you said. We look around. For example, I see new traders, and they fiddle with it too much. They'll click the button, put on the position, and they'll over fiddle with it, and they'll sit and watch it all day. And the day traders love this, up, down, up, down, up, down. And so to recognize other people, but then this is really a good insight you gave. What a great interview. The idea that when I recognize that self-awareness, it's not just enough to recognize, okay, I'm feeling too much fear, greed, or my lizard brain's, on overdrive, or maybe I'm overthinking it with my frontal cortex, but to have a heuristic to deal with that. That's a fantastic insight to develop a personal game plan in that idea of personal development. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Would you talk a little bit more about that, about how that might be done and how those neural pathways work, and how we can we have neuroplasticity. Every time we repeat a thought, I believe the word is, more myelin is laid down and it facilitates it faster. Could you talk a little bit about developing personal heuristics to deal with this after you have that epiphany of self-awareness?
So let me put it into the context of what happens at what the end of the book has to say, and then I'll wrap those two together.
Beautiful.
The end of the book says the takeaways for Beyond Greed and Fear are to understand that because we're imperfectly rational investors, there are opportunities for alpha. But those imperfect rational behaviors generate additional risk beyond fundamental risk. So it's not just that they give you an opportunity to beat the market, but they subject you to additional risk. If you're going to try to beat the market, you're going to have to face the fact that you're going to have to take on, the technical term is sentiment risk. You're going to have to understand that you're betting against other psychology. not just about the underlying fundamentals. It's not just that you think you can do a better job of figuring out the fundamentals and make money because you're better at gauging fundamentals than other investors. You're going to have to deal with the fact that you could be right about the fundamentals and still lose out because you get the psychology of others wrong. So,
Yes.
so you have to go in to the investment game understanding just how much sentiment risk exposure you're taking on when you try. Now, that means that as an investor, you have to engage in a lot of self-reflection to do what you asked me to talk about, which is to identify heuristics to help yourself. So heuristic is actually a Greek word. It means discovery. So a heuristic is it's a process for discovery. And in this case, we're talking about self-discovery. Ask yourself, why do I want to invest? Is my goal to develop wealth I will need at retirement, but I won't need it before retirement? Is it because I want to save for a down payment for a home? Is it because I think I'm smarter than most other investors, and I think I can beat them at the investing game? Is it because I just love to trade? It's really important to know what the answer is to that question and be honest with yourself, because investing strategy is different for people who want to save for retirement than people who want to trade for fun or enjoy or speculate. If you want to save for retirement, the strategy you undertake is boring. A successful strategy is boring. But I wouldn't say foolproof, but the odds are really good that you'll get where you want to go if the horizon is long. It's just that It won't satisfy your need for entertainment or self-actualization or being better than the next guy. So put a strategy in place if retirement is your goal that will do that, but don't expect it to do something else. If you have some other need from your portfolio, set aside but you also need to retire, save for retirement. Put some money aside to do what you want to do with your investment. And that should be money you can afford to lose. You might make it big, but money you can afford to lose. So the thing about investing for entertainment and gambling and thrill seeking is that it's a very different portfolio than if you want to be successful at it, and even successful at speculating, than it is for investing for retirement. So that means that, and it would really help, by the way, just like when you go swimming when you're young and you want to have a buddy to help you so you don't drown, it wouldn't help to have an investing buddy to share these conversations with, so that they help each other figure out exactly what they want to accomplish with their investing, what their real investing goals are, honestly, and then build portfolios to do what it is that they want to do. Thrill seeking, you really need to understand, is about generating dopamine. Investing for retirement, you need a little bit of dopamine so that you're excited about it and do the right thing. But pretty much it's automatic pilot if you set it up properly. But beating the market is not automatic pilot. And so the dopamine is really important. And we're dopamine seekers. And that means that if something is dull and boring, even if it's really important, but it doesn't generate dopamine, we'll tend to downplay it because our brains are dopamine seeking. And so we may need a buddy to help us say, well, aren't you forgetting about, because our dopamine seeking brain is forgetting about something important. But the idea is to really understand that if you and your buddy both sit down and over coffee or a beer, talk about what the heuristics are, the individual specifics, the names, anchoring and adjustment, representativeness, illusion of control, all of the things that are significant. I'm not using the technical terms, but You go through them in a detailed way, and those are the things you talk about when you're drinking a beer or having a coffee. Then when you sit down to talk about investing, you ask yourself, all right, where are we vulnerable here in terms of these specific heuristics or in terms of frame dependence? And you just help each other um, do a double check, what you would do with the car. If you're going through and seeing if it's got any problems before you go on a long trip, check the oil, check the transmission fluid and so on. So let me sort of stop there and see if that kind of gets at what it was you wanted me to talk about.
So the amount of gold you're handing out here is massive. I mean, it is incredible. As I listen to you, and our brain tends to do this. It's called the four effect. You open up a fortune cookie, say, "Yeah, that happened to me." So I have a little four effect going on because everything you're saying, I'm like, me, 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 and it's a wonderful experience. I also cannot. The entrepreneur in me will not ever miss the chance to pitch something. We have a lot of buddies here at the Cashflow Academy in our coaching program. For example, one of them is Corey Halliday, who retired as a Series 4 option principal, who his job was to manage risk at the firm of hundreds of floor traders and all of their heuristics going on, making sure the company is safe. That's a great buddy to have because of the experience. And, people read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad thinking it was about assets and liabilities. It's about a guy who had a mentor. It's about a guy who had a buddy to help them through. So if I can be this egregious, go to not only go pick up Beyond Greed and Fear, but go to cashflowbonus.com and learn more about the buddies we've got to help you here. I can't resist that. You teed that up unintentionally, but I got to hit that ball when it's over the plate. So there you go. I'm going to finish with a couple of things here. And I sell a lot of books, and my audience already knows that when I invite on an author, they're supposed to buy the book or I wouldn't have them on there. And people say, well, don't turn your podcast into an infomercial. I said, why not? If it benefits people, they should make it. And investing is about putting money out and getting more back. Let me just sell the book for a moment, if I may. And my audience already knows what I'm going to say because I do it the same way a lot. Number one, the people that just want money, they rob themselves of the relevant experiences of personal growth that comes with earning it. The advice culture not only robs us through putting assets under management, which they scalp with fees, which are enormous in terms of long-term compounding. It's very, very important that people understand that if all you want is money, you miss out on even a more rich life, contemplation, growth. And when I was not a very good, I didn't fall in love with learning until after I left college because it was so hard to keep up with the chemistry and physics. But I had one teacher that really helped me, and he was my basketball coach, the late Rick Majerus, Hall of Fame coach. And what I found is the development of team, preparation, flat out adversity and toughness. It was the hardest class I took physically and mentally because it was so much pressure and taxation and so much going on that I was able to take that stuff and then transfer it and superimpose it in other areas of my life that just blessed me huge, that class. Well, I just know this, that what we're speaking about in Beyond Greed and Fear, you may be pursuing this to make money, and you will. If you follow it, you'll do better. But what I would really suggest people consider is a processional, a 90-degree effect, a ripple effect of that stone in the pond, that these heuristics, this self-awareness, will absolutely improve the idea of understanding dopamine pathways in your own machinery. It will transfer into every area where you're not just a rich person, but you have a rich life, rich relationships. One of the great sages was, and I always say his name wrong, is Thaler of Miletus, who was the first of the Greek sages. He not only discovered what an option could be by putting leases on oil presses and then selling the intrinsic value of them later as the first option trader. He also has this engraved in stone, know thyself. And know thyself is a caveat. It is a warning that often we can be our own best ally, but our own worst enemy. And as we know ourselves, we find our strengths. As we know ourselves, we find our weaknesses. And knowing what's under the hood, it just helps us navigate better. I have to find when we're in the same city so we can have a steak together, and that'll be my final pitch for the book. Let's talk about degrees of separation. If you had the chance to sit down with someone who linked arms with a Nobel Prize winner in economics and go have a steak or a beer or a lunch or whatever, would you take that up and would you cover the tab? I guarantee you that if I take you to a restaurant, I'm going to spend a lot more money than I would at Amazon.com on Beyond Greed and Fear. But I'll tell you, I pick up that tab any day because the knowledge is huge. And another thing that you said that people should listen to. So I've authored a couple of books poorly, but I can tell you this. If a person, you said you spent 4 years on this book, you will get more out of reading this book than that lunch could ever deliver. Because when a person cares about it and they write a book like this, they are forced to categorize what they believe they know. They are forced to organize this, and they'll care a lot about it. And I will tell you the ROI on pennies on the dollar, the ROI, return on investment, both financially, but really even more in personal growth, is it's like getting in the best IPO you could ever have. It's unspeakable. So go to Amazon.com today and get your copy locked up of Beyond Greed and Fear, Understanding Behavioral Finance and Psychology Investing, because I will tell you, as a 30-year, I don't know if I'm a veteran of the markets or a victim of the markets. I think I might be more of a veteran than a victim. But I can tell you, learning these things early and being able to identify them early as they happen and say, it's happening to me, the earlier you do that, the faster you'll get to where you want to go. So, it's better than taking them out to dinner for sure. And if you'd like to get closer to a Nobel Prize winner, this is a great way to do it. Go pick up Beyond Greed and Fear, and that's my pitch for this book. And after you've read that, maybe you think, yeah, maybe I need a buddy at the Cashflow Academy to help me. Any last words you'd say for a fence sitter who is saying, gee, I've thought about, maybe being more involved, but, investing seems like it's complicated and hard. Could it really be fun to learn about myself? Is this really a big adventure or not? What would you tell a person who's kind of on the fence about maybe saying, I want to do less of the advice culture and put it on someone else? And I'd say I'd rather have this as a life skill than a skill for hire. I'd rather have this as a life skill. What would you say to those people?
Before I answer that question, I want to thank you for your kind words. And to say, I would be more than happy to take you up on your offer to have dinner one night if we meet in person.
Oh, well, now it's a done deal now. I mean, it's going to happen now. So.
But I think what you said, Andy, is more than a book pitch. It's true wisdom. That these ideas are much more about life as a whole than just about investing. And, happiness is about connecting to other people, and investing is part of connecting to other people. The buddy system is part of connecting to other people. Your sons, your wife, your family, they're all part of life, and investing just helps us make life better if we do it well. I would say that in terms of fence sitters, so there's a bias called status quo bias, and status quo bias is about the fear of changing. And so why do we sit on a fence? It's because we're scared about making a mistake. We're scared about losing. And if we lose, we can lose in different ways. We can lose a little money, but we could also lose some self-esteem if we're insecure within ourselves and we can't handle making a mistake. So I would say that there are few things involved. One is tippy-toe, so that if you do lose a little bit, it won't change your life. Just so that's to get some confidence that understand the mechanics. In the end, if you do this on the long term, the odds are stacked in your favor. But along the way, especially at the beginning, there's a chance you might lose a little bit. And the ones who come out ahead in the long run, I say, just remember the old Aesop's fable about the hare and the tortoise. The tortoise wins at the end because the tortoise just keeps on going. And the hare loses because it starts off great with all this dopamine, but then it fades and it loses its focus. So if you can pull together internal strength so that if you make a mistake, it doesn't make you a failure. You just made a mistake and you can recover. Life is about growth opportunities and we learn from our mistakes. In fact, they're gifts in a way. Look at them as gifts. Don't make mistakes just to make a mistake. But if you make a mistake, it's a great learning opportunity. It doesn't make you a bad person or imperfect person. It's an opportunity to grow. Jeff Bezos made huge mistakes before, Amazon grew into the gigantic industry that it is. Because happiness is about trusting deep relationships with others, if you do have a good buddy, they can help you with that fear of what happens if things don't go wrong. They can be there to comfort you when things aren't all right, because in the end, the tortoise beats the hare, and we can all be the tortoise. We don't have to be the hare.
Boy, that insight's profound. It reminds me of my first trade. I was lucky that by the time I made my first trade, I at least understood a little bit about what you're talking about. I'll see people, it's not about losing the money. It is about the fear of being wrong. I've heard, I don't know if it's true, I heard some guys at Caltech put some people in a functional MRI machine and began to just show them evidence contrary to what they believed, mistakes they'd made. And they said the neural pathways that lit up were probably similar to that of being chased by a bear. And the fear of making a mistake is, I think that holds back more people than anything I've ever seen, having taught on, I don't know how many countries I've spoken in. I've lost count, but people are the same all over the world that way. My first trade, I went out back in the Daytech days where trading was like $30 a trade as a fee. Now it's free. And I remember I bought 10 shares of a stock that was $16 a share for $160. And I really didn't care. I made $10, but it cost me $30 to buy it and $30 to sell it to make that $10. And I didn't do it to make money. I did it to see, does this work? And so you can do that. What a fantastic interview. I tell people we're lucky to have a bit of listenership. We're certainly not Joe Rogan, but I thought maybe the only person that would listen would be my wife and me. But I found in bringing on people so much smarter than me, it's blessed my life huge. And you've been a major, you're one of the guests that I'll certainly, that set yourself apart, no question about it. So, Hersh Shefrin, I've been practicing to get the pause in between the two SHs. Fantastic book, Beyond Greed and Fear, Understanding Behavioral Finance and the Psychology of Investing. We thank you for your time. Please hang out just a bit after I close the show so I can properly thank you. You've been watching and listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast. Please like and subscribe, hit your notification bell, drop by Amazon.com, pick up your copy, and also we have some free stuff as well at cashflowbonus.com with we'd love to be a buddy. If you'd like a great buddy to help you do this, that's what we're here to do. And with that, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. We'll see you next time.